He judged his first county fair here in Ripley County in the early 1980s. He's married to former Debbie Blessing, a past Ripley County 10-year 4-H member.
In this first class of commercial ewe lambs. We're going to start out with the longest bodied ewe lamb, the ewe lamb that's just the most correct in that front shoulder. I really like the smoothness of blend of that neck into that shoulder and the deep set of that rear leg. We're going to follow it with the lamb that most nearly follows that pattern, a lamb that's just got a little bit less length in its overall loin, a lamb that just doesn't quite set the muscularity in that rear leg, but a good lamb in its overall length of body. The next lamb is a lamb that's just a little harder to get a handle on. We get our hands down its back, and we find that that loin just shortens up just a tad bit in comparison to the first two in the class, but where it really lacks is in that dimension of that rear leg. I'd just like to give it just a little more strength there to move it up. The next lamb in the class is probably the youngest lamb in here, the lamb that just hasn't quite caught up with the others. It will eventually, just doesn't have the overall size and scale that our first two lambs in the class, our first three lambs in the class had. Thank you, a very nice class, all four of you.
First place out of our hamster ewe lamb class goes to Sophia Sullivan. Second, Zoe Meisberger. Third, Alexa Franklin. And fourth, Landon Smith.
Just so some of you know, you're going to see some lambs that might not come back and you think, what's going on? We invited Dearborn County sheep exhibitors to bring their lambs to a show, so they actually got to bring the animals they had out and participate in a 4-H show. They will not be directly in competition with Ripley County lambs. At the end of our Grand Champion Drive, they'll have a best of Dearborn County class. But you will see some Dearborn County kids in here and maybe some new people you think, I haven't seen them before. So we have invited Dearborn County exhibitors. About 8 of them have joined us, so just so you know what's going on.
Two very nice yearling ewes out here in this class. Really appreciate both of them quite a bit. A lot of differences, though, in these two. The ewe that we're starting the class with is a ewe that just has a lot of muscle definition, a ewe that's just got a tremendously wide top about her and a good, clean, wide chest floor. The ewe that's following her follows that pattern fairly closely, maybe not quite the leg volume that our first place one has, but she narrows out just a tad bit in the chest floor. We really appreciate this. A good, clean ewe that ought to have a lot of growth. Thank you. If you notice, I Told the young lady I wouldn't shake her hands. We're not to touch you guys in this show, so we're not doing that. And that's why I'm not talking to you individually either. I probably should have pointed that out. That's not my normal pattern of judging. I normally talk to each one of these 4-H'ers about their animal, why it's placed where it's at, and then I talk on the microphone for mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. Well, today with what we're doing, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk on the mic, let you know where I'm placing you. We cannot have hand contact or any of that according to the rules that I was sent. And I won't be talking to you in showmanship as far as asking questions. So just a few things so you understand.
First place goes to Riley McGee and second to Sophia Sullivan. We'll now show for the champion Hamp.
Four really nice individuals out here as we analyze them for your champion and reserve champion. As we look at these, we're looking for ewes that have that femininity, that youthful appearance, that freshness that we look at needing. And we're looking at ewes that's going to pass along some genetics to the offspring for a market animal. As we analyze these lambs and really get a good handle on them and get our hands on them, we're going to use the ewe lamb as your champion in this division. I just really appreciate the youthfulness, the cleanliness, the freshness that this ewe lamb brings to the ring. Taking nothing against or away from any of the others, I just think this lamb kind of pops as it comes out. For reserve, we're going to come back to this yearling and use her for the reserve champion. A really nice individual in her own right, really heavy boned, heavy muscled, a ewe that's just got a little bit more grease on her for me today, but still two great individuals these kids need to be really proud of.
Your champion Hamp goes to Sophia Sullivan and the reserve to Riley McGee. The champion Hamp plaque is sponsored by the Sherman Law Firm. Sophia Sullivan will be your homegrown Hamp champion.
In this class of hair sheep ewe lambs, really like both these ewes, a lot of differences between the two. The brownish ewe is just a little longer bodied, a little longer in the loin, sets just a little bit deeper in that leg junction down on the leg. Really appreciate her as she moves around the ring. If I changed her any at all, I'd level her out across that top line just a little bit. Same goes, though, for the white ewe. I really appreciate her youthfulness. She's a lot younger, I would imagine, than the first place animal in this class. Good wide chest floor on this ewe lamb. A ewe lamb, though, that just gets a little outsized, a little outscaled out here in this ring with that brown one.
First place goes to Allie Hickey and second to Jocelyn Allen.
interesting class here in these yearling ewes. Really appreciate each one, but each one of them brings just a little bit of differences whenever you come out here at the ring with them. We're going to start out with the tan-colored ewe, a ewe that is definitely the longest loined ewe in the class, deepest set to that leg. Yeah, I'd like to clean her up in the middle just a little bit. She's a little heavy there for me. But you get over the top of her and you get your hands on her. She's the widest made individual in the class. Good clean chest floor about this ewe, just the broodiest ewe in the class. We follow her with the ewe that I think has that length of body that we really want to look for in these Katahdins. I really appreciate her from the standpoint that as she moves around the ring, she's the levelest of the last two as we move around the ring and as she steps out. I really like that extension of her neck into that shoulder. She blends very smoothly and very nicely. If I change something about her, I'd like to give her just a little more width over that loin. As we come down to the third place, just a real youthful type of individual. We talked about a little bit about that top line and right around that tail set, but still a ewe that you've got to appreciate for length of body. Really appreciate her, too, for the way that she just extends that neck way out forward of those shoulders. Just really a very eye-appealing type of individual, but just not quite the length over the top or the width in that top area that I'd like to see in comparison to the other two. Good class. Thank you, ladies.
First place goes to Allie Hickey. Second place goes to Jocelyn Allen. And third place goes to Jocelyn Allen. We'll now show for the division Katahdin.
And showing for your champion Katahdin, we've got good individuals out here, but as we analyze them for what they are and where they've come from, I really am looking for that ewe that's making that progression for this breed away from things that used to be really sway back, weak topped, sheep that just didn't have that eye appeal because of the fineness of bone. But I think we're making that progression all across the Katahdin breed, and I think exhibitors and breeders are to be congratulated on that as they made that move. As we analyze the first place yearling ewe over at the front line on the opposite side, the first one there, just a real big-bodied ewe, a ewe that's got a lot of width over the top, width in that chest floor, and width at that set of those rear legs. Just a really high-volume type of individual. Sure, we talked about maybe cleaning up that middle just a little bit, but still a good broody type of ewe that ought to go a long way. First place ewe lamb, just a tremendously long individual that I really appreciated for its overall levelness as it moved across the ring. Maybe not quite the width across that top, maybe not the width in that chest floor that our first place ewe in the yearling class had, but still a good individual to win that ewe lamb class and probably could stand a lot of competition as well. As I come down to it, though, the ewe that just kind of puts things together for me today really gives me that appeal as far as a broodiness goes. We're going to use the yearling ewe for your champion. We're going to come back to the ewe lamb for your reserve.
Allie Hickey has your champion Katahdin, and your reserve also goes to Allie Hickey. The natural color ewe lambs are now going to show. Jocelyn Allen's yearling ewe takes the homegrown champion, and her other ewe takes the reserve homegrown champion.
In this natural colored ewe lamb class with just one entry, it's a nice ewe lamb, a lot of length of body. Really appreciate that about her. Really appreciate the cleanness up there in that front shoulder as well.
Evan Kramer takes first out of the natural color ewe lamb class.
Another single entry here in this yearling ewe class for natural colored. Nice long-bodied ewe, a ewe that's probably the best attributes, that length of loin, in comparison from the front shoulder on back to the back of that last rib. This ewe's a nice balanced type of individual, good structure about that hip on her as well.
Evan Kramer is your first out of the natural colored yearling ewe class. Now we'll show for our natural color champion.
For your champion natural colored ewe, we're going to use the ewe lamb today. I just really appreciate that length of body that she possesses from the back of that shoulder to the last rib. Just really an exceptional individual, very clean in that front end as well, and very feminine in that extension of that neck into that shoulder. Taking nothing away from that yearling ewe, she's really a thick-made individual, wide over that top, springs just a tad bit more to the rear rib than the fore rib, giving me some capacity back there in that loin area, but still a ewe that's just not quite got that overall body dimension, especially in that first half of her body as opposed to the last half. Thank you, a very good class.
Champion Natural Color goes to Evan Kramer with his lamb, and that plaque is sponsored by the Sherman Law Firm. Reserved Champion Natural Color goes to Evan Kramer as well with his yearling ewe. Now entering the ring is the AOB ewe lamb class.
In this class of AOB ewe lambs, we really have two types of individuals out here. We've got a little shorter statured lamb, a lamb that's just not quite as tall, but a lamb that's got a tremendous amount of bone about her, a wide-chested lamb, a lamb that's got a lot of length, both in its forebody as well as its rear. Really appreciate the muscularity of this lamb as it comes out. Taking nothing away from this lamb that's in second, this lamb in second is another long-bodied lamb, maybe not quite the set to that rear leg that our first place lamb has, and a lamb that I'd like to just strengthen a little bit on that top line to make her walk just a little truer, a little wider in her step as she moves out around the ring, but a good ewe lamb in her own right.
Riley McGee is first. Second goes to Annika Struing out of the AOB ewe lamb class. Now we'll have the AOB yearling ewes.
perhaps the most difficult class I've had, and just 2 of them in that class. But a lot of differences between these. We're going to start out with the little shorter statured, little shorter coupled lamb in the class, but a lamb that I just really, or a yearling ewe that I just really think puts the package together for what she is. I really appreciate the muscularity and the width that this ewe has, both in the front end and the rear end. Good level top about this ewe. If I change this ewe a little bit, I'd like to lengthen her out just a tad and maybe clean up that front shoulder as it junctions into the neck. But a good ewe in her own right. The ewe I've gotten second is a ewe that I really like that front shoulder on. She just really blends that neck into the shoulder, very feminine in that front end, but a little weaker across that top line. She just doesn't have the strength in that top line as it breaks past that shoulder to get her ahead of the ewe ahead of her. She also just doesn't quite have the volume of muscle in that rear leg to get her ahead of that ewe ahead of her. She tends to be just a little narrower in that chest floor. But still, a good ewe that ought to do great for this 4-H'er. Really do appreciate it.
First place goes to Riley McGee, second to Sydney Montgomery. We'll now show for our champion AOB.
For your champion AOB, it's really a fairly easy decision for me. Well, I'm going to use that ewe lamb. I just really like the package that she brings out of here. I like that width in that chest floor. I really like the cleanness of line that she has, as well as the muscularity. We come back for reserve, and we've got a few things to add up and subtract and kind of divide as we start looking and analyzing these 2 ewes. I really like the chest floor on the yearling ewe, as opposed to that of the lamb. I really like that overall muscularity in that hind saddle of that yearling ewe. But whenever we come down to the cleanliness of line, I really like that front shoulder on the ewe lamb. She's just a real balanced type individual up there in that front end. She's not wasteful. And I had a little bit of problem with that on that yearling whenever we analyzed him. But whenever you get your hands on these 2, the yearling ewe just really puts together a lot more muscularity. You may think she's heavy, and she is a big ewe, but really you come down through there and you count those ribs down that spinous process as well, and she just really has a lot of growth about her and a lot of cleanness. She's going to be your reserve.
Riley McGee is your champion AOB with her ewe lamb, as well as the homegrown champion AOB. Your reserve champion AOB also goes to Riley McGee with her yearling ewe.
In this Dorset Advantage class of ewe lambs, we're going to start out with the longer bodied, longer topped, just a ewe that just puts a really nice package together. If I change that ewe any, I'd give her just a little more volume in that hind leg, bring that leg just down a little deeper just to get her up there, but still a beautiful ewe lamb for this 4-H'er. The next ewe lamb just gets outsized, out-horsed, outscaled, probably out-aged in this class. Whenever we start looking at Dorset Advantage, you know, it's a Dorset and any other breed that's made up what the Dorset Advantage is. This one's probably one of the smaller breeds that have been used with the Dorset buck, and just gets outsized whenever we compare it to that ewe lamb ahead of it. But a nice ewe lamb ought to grow out very nicely for that 4-H'er.
Emily Bruner, your first place and second place exhibitor in the Dorset Advantage ewe lamb class. Next, we'll show your yearling ewe.
Big growthy Dorset Advantage yearling ewe, a ewe that just has a lot of things going very nicely for it, but getting just a tad bit greasy for me. You put your hands over those ribs, you put your hands back in that loin area, and you're really starting to feel a little more cover than you might want to see in a yearling ewe at this stage of development. But still a ewe that you've got to appreciate for her muscularity and her growth. A ewe, though, that I'd like to make just a little bit smoother in her transition of the neck into that shoulder, make her just a little less bold up there from the standpoint of lambing and everything else. But still a nice ewe in her own right. Thank you.
Your Dorset Advantage yearling ewe, first place goes to Madison McGee. We'll now show for the champion Dorset Advantage.
For me today, we're going to use the lamb for your Dorset Advantage champion. I just really feel like we've got a fresher, cleaner type of individual, a lamb that maybe is a little green, but whenever you get your hands on her, you've got to appreciate that overall length. She's very eye-appealing in her style and really moves very nicely. Taking nothing away from the other two, the yearling ewe will be your reserve ewe that I do appreciate for her growthiness. Again, I'd like to just clean her up just a little bit. Take a little bit of that cover, a little bit of that grease off of her to get her to compete just a little higher today, but a good ewe in her own right.
Emily Bruner exhibits your champion Dorset Advantage. Madison McGee exhibited the reserve champion Dorset Advantage. And your homegrown champion Dorset is Emily Bruner.
In this class, Suffolk Ewe Lamb's a really nice individual out here. Really moves nicely whenever it's on the move back toward the pins, but really appreciate her as she levels out across that shoulder and back to that hip area. Falls off just a little bit at that tail head, just giving us a little less volume back there in that hind leg, but still a very youthful appearing, very young, very green type of individual that ought to do well for this 4-H member.
Your Suffolk Ewe Lamb first place goes to Emily Canuven. Our Suffolk aged ewes are now entering the ring.
two really big-bodied ewes right here in this yearling class for the Suffolks. We're going to use the ewe that just appears to be just a little shorter-sided. But once you get your hands on that ewe, she definitely is a long-bodied individual. These two ewes measure about the same. But I just like the cleanness of that front shoulder on our first place ewe over our second place ewe in this class. I feel that the second place ewe just drops a little bit back there from the hooks to pins, just sets that tail head just a little bit lower than our first place animal. But two nice ewes right here for these 4-H members.
Emily Canuven takes first and second out of that class. Will now show for the champion Suffolk.
For your champion Suffolk, we're going to use the yearling ewe. Really appreciate that style and that balance that she has out here in the ring, taking nothing away from that ewe lamb. The ewe lamb just is still awfully green, just doesn't have quite that muscle expression or development in that rear leg to get it ahead of her. For reserve, we're going to use the second place yearling as well.
Emily Canuven exhibits your champion and homegrown champion Suffolk, as well as your reserve and homegrown reserve champion Suffolk. We'll now begin with our commercial ewe lambs.
good group of commercial ewe lambs here as we come down and look at them. We're going to start out with the ewe lamb just a little taller than our second place ewe lamb, a ewe lamb that I really appreciate in that front shoulder and that blend as that lamb carries itself all the way back to that hip juncture. A lot of bone in this lamb, a good wide chest floor. The lamb in second, just a little shorter statured lamb, a lamb that maybe just doesn't quite have that length from the shoulder back to the back rib, but really a lamb that you've got to appreciate for the width over the top line. The lamb in third, a lamb that's another one of those big structured type of lambs, but a lamb that just kind of lets you fall apart back there on that hind leg. I'd like to see a little more volume there, maybe just a little less coarseness in that front shoulder, but a good, tall, long lamb whenever you analyze him. The two ewe lambs here that I've got in fourth and fifth, very, very similar in their overall makeup. We're going to use fourth over fifth just for a little longer top line, a little leveler out over that dock.
Out of Class 1 of the commercial ewe lambs, first place goes to Wyatt Smith. Second, Maddie Dawson. Third, Landon Smith. Fourth, Emily Bruner. And fifth, Emily Bruner. Now we'll have our second class of commercial ewe lambs.
for the commercials. We're going to start out with a longer body. A lamb that really blends that neck into the shoulder very nicely for a female, but a lamb that doesn't lose a thing and back into that leg. Fairly closely, maybe just a little bit coarser. Really nice balanced individual as you get your hands on him. The black lamb here in third, a lamb that I bone, not quite the dimension that the first two lambs had ahead of it, but still a lamb that carries back into a really long saddle. The lamb that I've got in fourth is a lamb that's just a little shorter coupled, as is the lamb in fifth. Just not quite the overall length in that loin area or into that rib area to get it up any higher. The next lamb, really like the lamb. I'd like to give just a her up ahead of the one in front of it, but still a very close placing between the two. The next lamb with a lot of wool on it, a lamb that's just a little greener in its overall makeup today, just a little bit finer in its features, and I'd like to just give it a little more time on feed to get it to move up there with these others.
Out of Class 2 commercial ewe lambs, first place, Emily Bruner. Second, Evan Kramer. Third, Wyatt Smith. Fourth, Maddie Dawson. Fifth, Shelby Dawson. And sixth, Waylon Hunter. We'll now show for our champion commercial ewe.
Use the heavier weight ewe lamb out of that last class, just really we're going to follow her with reserve. A little bit shorter, a little coarser in that shoulder. That first place animal is set. Out here today compared to these two.
Our U goes to Emily. Our homegrown champion goes to Emily. Our homegrown reserve also goes to Emily.
Two young ladies have. I appreciate the way she profiled a little bit leveler line on that top. She's a really, really long-bodied type of ewe. Not quite the thickness at that first place. Broody ewe in her own right.
Out of the yearling, Dawson, second to Shelby Dawson. We're ready for our grand drive. Exhibiting of Hampshire, Riley McGee. Champion Katahdin, Allie Hickey. Evan Kramer. Champion also Riley McGee. Champion Dorset Advantage, exhibited by Emily Bruner. Reserve Champion Dorset, exhibited by Suffolk, exhibited by Emily Canuven. Reserve, also by our Champion Commercial, exhibited by Emily Bruner, and reserved by Evan Crane. Drive, a round of applause. Just a quick announcement. The best of Dearborn County.
Let's give a round of applause. I was that you their live show or that they had to show, and I know several of them do show opportunity that you've given to them. I do as a former extension. I really appreciate it. The show that you've got with just these Ripley County sheep out here. I do appreciate each and every one of them. As we come down and we look at them, you know, I hope you see on for nice appearance. Look, going for those kind of individuals out here. Kids have really worked hard, and I think they need another round of today. I feel like there's 2 or 3 ewes out here that are really deserving of that award. Really think if I had to pick a ewe and had to pick 10 of them just to like what I'd like to have at home right here. Things get a little tighter, a little more difficult to sort out, but I really appreciate that ewe lamb from the very first class we had today, that Hamp ewe lamb. She'll be your reserve grand.
Your grand champion ewe lamb goes to Riley McGee with her AOB. Your reserve grand champion ewe lamb and your Sullivan with her Hamp. Our grand champion credit in America Greensburg.
to start out your marketplace show two really nice sorts of lambs, but lambs that are a little different overall makeup and design. Really appreciate each one of them for different things. This lamb that we're starting with, just a big volume type of lamb with a lot of muscularity about it, and I really like the length of loin on this lamb as well. Good smooth blend of that neck into the shoulder, not real prominent up in that shoulder, not real bulging, and I'm not a big shoulder fan. I just do not care for the shoulder. I really like to see a refined look about him, and this lamb's really showing that too. The next lamb is a lamb that just gets a little out horse in this class, but I appreciate the lamb for its levelness across the top line, really good between the lines, but a lamb that just doesn't quite have the weight and the muscularity that the first place lamb in the class has. beautifully done on both of these lambs. However, whenever you get your hands on that first place lamb handles just a little harder to the touch, just a little firmer in his overall makeup. Really appreciate that about it. Taking nothing away from the second lamb, maybe just a touch shorter in the loin, but still a lamb that you've got to appreciate, but I expect to find just a little harder in his overall handle today. interesting class of lightweight crossbred lambs here. We're going to start out with the young lady's ewe lamb up on that far end, just a lamb that I really appreciate for his firmness of touch, its overall length of body, the correctness that it possesses up in that front shoulder region and all the way back into the set on that leg. The second ewe lamb in this class, second place animal, follows that pattern very closely. Good firm to the touch lamb. A lamb, though, if I start analyzing compared to the first place lamb, maybe not quite as smooth in that blend in that front shoulder, but still a lamb that you've got to appreciate for the volume in that rear rack. As we come down to this third place wether, really like the lamb, but he's getting just a little bit of middle to him, not quite the length that those first two were, especially in the loin region, but a good firm to the touch lamb. The lamb right here that the young man's gotten forth, really a long-bodied lamb. A lamb, though, that as you analyze him and you put your hands on this lamb, he's just a little narrow in the front chest floor, a little narrow as he carries himself back into that loin, just not quite the volume of hind saddle that those first three lambs had. The young lady's lamb is a Fuller lamb, a lamb that you really got to appreciate for its overall size and scale. Really like the size that this lamb brings out, really like the cleanliness in the front shoulder, but whenever you get your hands on the lamb, he just doesn't quite have the firmness of touch or the overall length of that loin to get him to compare up a little higher with those other lambs in the class. But a good lamb, a lamb that ought to carcass out really nicely.
Out of Class 1, first place goes to Maddie Dawson, second to Shelby Dawson, third Emily Bruner, fourth Wyatt Smith, and fifth Lila Strewing. Now we'll have Class 2 of our blackface commercial market lambs.
In this second class, blackface crossbred lambs, really, really good quality as we move all the way through. We're going to start out with a young lady's lamb that just is the firmest of touch, a lamb that I really appreciate for his cleanness of line, a lamb that's just really bold in that front shoulder, but not to the excessive degree, carries himself back really well, and just pops in that rear muscle expression. The young man's lamb is a long-bodied lamb, and he does not disappoint whenever you get your hands on him. Just a long-loined lamb with a lot of natural thickness about him. Not quite the muscle expression in that rear leg that our first place lamb has, but a good lamb in his own right. The young lady's lamb right here in third is a lamb that just isn't quite as strong on that top line. I'd like to straighten it out just a little bit more across the top line to get it to stand any higher, but a good firm handling ewe lamb. The next lamb, the young man's got a lamb that is just a little shorter in its overall makeup today, not quite the length of loin, nor in that rib area. This lamb just doesn't quite have that hind saddle cut that the first three lambs in the class has, but a really clean front-shouldered lamb, a lamb that you've got to appreciate for his muscularity there. The lamb the young man's got that's wooled, really appreciate this lamb, but this lamb's got a lot of growing to do. He's got some loose areas back underneath that wool and in that skin, and he's just not quite filled in as much. This lamb's going to be a big one whenever he's done. He's just not quite there yet today. Good job, young man. Thank you.
Out of Class 2, first place, Annika Struing. Second, Landon Smith. Third, Shelby Dawson. Fourth, Landon Smith. And fifth, Waylon Hunter. We'll now have our third class of blackface commercial market lambs.
Very, very competitive class right here. We've got 5 animals that if you'd switch them around yourself sitting there, I probably wouldn't argue with you, because as I handle them and as I analyze them, I keep thinking about different parts that I like about different lambs, and I could see people using them in a different way. But we're going to start out with a young man's lamb here that I just really like, from the standpoint that he's just really muscular from his front shoulder all the way back to that leg. He really has a deep set to that leg. He's got a good muscular front shoulder, but not obtrusive. I really like the length on this lamb. He's just really well balanced. The lamb in second follows that pattern very closely. Maybe not quite the length of loin that first place lamb's got, but a lamb that you've got to appreciate for the firmness of touch that he brings. The lamb in third is a lamb that's got a lot of those same qualities. I'd like to strengthen that top line just a little bit. Tends to be just a little weak right at the point of that shoulder, and I'd like to give her just a little bit more strength there to move her up. The next lamb in class is the long loined lamb. I really appreciate that about this lamb. But whenever we start analyzing him, he stands just a little narrow in that chest floor. He carries that all the way back into the narrowness over the top of that loin. So he's just not got quite the hind saddle cut that our first 3 lambs in the class have. The next lamb in the class is a firm handling lamb. Really appreciate him from that standpoint. Really appreciate that rounded shape to that rear leg. But whenever we analyze that front shoulder, I'd like to clean that up just a little bit, give him a little bit more levelness across that top line. He tends to be a little shorter in that loin in comparison to the other lambs in the class. Good class, very competitive from top to bottom. Thank you.
Our first place out of that class, first goes to Devin Ralston, second, Evan Kramer, third, Maddie Dawson, fourth, Wyatt Smith, and fifth, Devin Ralston. Now we will select our champion cross.
in your blackface crossbred drive for champion here, we've got excellent individuals. But as I analyze that first row over there, really good lambs, very similar in their development as far as their structural development. Lambs that are very similar in what I'm looking for, with a lot of length, a good hind saddle, a deep set to the leg, and I think we've got that. Analyzing doe down through there, and I've really found two lambs that I really like. I really like that heavyweight lamb. Really believe that as far as the package goes, he's got the most red meat and the most high saleable cuts in him of anything else in the class. And he'll be our champion for the black faces. For reserve, things get a little closer, but really that first place in the second class matches that pattern of him. Really deep set to that leg. That lamb will be your reserve champion.
Our champion blackface cross goes to Devin Ralston out of Class 3, and the reserve champion goes to Annika Struing out of Class 2. Last reminder, if you are selling in the auction on Friday, you must get your auction picture taken tonight. You must get your auction pictures taken tonight. Bailey is back here and ready for you.
Two nice AOB lambs. We're going to start out the class with a little longer bodied lamb, a lamb that's just got a little more thickness to her, a lamb that's just a little wider in that top line. The lamb in second is a good firm handling lamb. Really appreciate that about this lamb. A lamb that's just not quite got the leg muscle that first place lamb has in the class. But other than that, a really good top-notch lamb. Thank you.
Your champion AOB was exhibited by Sophie Sullivan and reserved by Waylon Hunter. We will now get lined up for our grand drive. All right. Entering the ring with our champion Dorset, exhibited by Madison McGee. Our reserve Dorset, exhibited by Kylie Weber. Our champion Hamp, exhibited by Zoe Meisberger. Our reserve Hamp, exhibited by Evan Kramer. Our champion Natural Color, exhibited by Alexa Franklin. Our reserve champion Natural Color, exhibited by Evan Kramer. Our champion Oxford, exhibited by Emily Bruner. Our reserve champion Oxford, exhibited by Riley McGee. Our champion Suffolk, exhibited by Madison McGee. Our reserve champion Suffolk, exhibited by Emily Canuven. Our champion Whiteface Cross, exhibited by Riley McGee. Our reserve champion Whiteface Cross, exhibited by Emily Bruner. Our champion Blackface Cross, exhibited by Devin Ralston. Our reserve champion Blackface Cross, exhibited by Annika Struing. Our champion AOB, exhibited by Sophia Sullivan. And our reserve champion AOB, exhibited by Waylon Hunter. Everybody ringside, please give your Grand Drive a round of applause. I'd like to take a second and announce our 4-H queen for this year, Alex Dudley, and our 4-H king, Oliver Moster, who's not here anymore, but give them a round of applause.
please give these exhibitors and the other exhibitors of market lambs a really nice round of applause. Folks, I don't care what year it is, whether it's a COVID year or anything else, these kids are to be congratulated for some of the best quality of lambs in this market show that I've seen. I really appreciate what they've done, the hard work that's gone into it, because we all know it takes a lot of hard work to get a lamb to look as good as those lambs look over there on that front row. And taking nothing away from these seconds either. But for me today, one lamb just really stands out with the length of body, length of loin, really cleanness in that front end, and a good firm touch and a deep set to the leg. The Suffolk lamb will be your grand champion. Whenever we start looking at the reserve, we look at this reserve champion Suffolk. We look at that white-face champion and the black-face champion, as well as the Oxford champion for your reserve. All of them giving us a lot of good qualities. Really appreciate each and every one of them. Good firm handle on those lambs. Good clean front shoulder. Really think we've got three lambs that are really close to each other. But the black-face cross sets a deeper leg. The black-face cross will be your reserve. Your county born and raised or homegrown lamb will be this AOB champion. Really like that lamb, liked it in class, and really has a lot of growth to it. Whenever we come to analyze for reserve homegrown, we're down to these other two. The Suffolk lamb, I'd like to level that top just a little bit to get it to stand any higher. Therefore, I'm going to use this lamb right here for your reserve homegrown.
Last call for auction pictures. Last call for auction pictures. Our grand champion market lamb goes to Madison McGee with her Suffolk. Our grand champion market lamb banner is sponsored by Manderley Healthcare. The market lamb plaque grand champion is sponsored by Jason and Monica Hansen Family Farm. And the grand champion market lamb buyer banner is sponsored by Farm Bureau Insurance, Washington Township. Our reserve grand champion market lamb went to Devin Ralston with his black face crossed. The reserve grand champion market lamb banner is sponsored by Helena Agra Enterprises. The reserve grand champion plaque is sponsored by the Sherman Law Firm. The reserve grand champion buyer banner was sponsored by Lucky 13 Boar Goats. The Grand Champion Homegrown Market Lamb was sponsored, Grand Champion Homegrown Market Lamb went to Sophia Sullivan with her AOB. And the banner is sponsored by Spear Family Show Pigs. The plaque is sponsored by GEI Fluid Power. And the buyer banner was sponsored by Wagner Trust Manufacturing Incorporated. The Reserve Grand Champion Homegrown Market Lamb went to Emily Bruner with her Oxford. And that plaque is sponsored by Kev's Field of Dreams, Kevin Menchofer and family. The banner is sponsored by Greensburg Soy Processors. And the buyer banner is sponsored by Wagner Trust Manufacturing Incorporated.
For your Dearborn County, best of Dearborn County market lamb, we're going to use the heavier weight lamb right here. The young lady's got just a really good growthy type of sheep, good firm handle to it. Whenever it comes down to reserve champion, we're looking over here at this heavier weight lamb, a lamb that I really appreciate for his overall length of body, a lamb though that I'd like to give a little more volume in that hind leg to get him to stand up just a tad bit higher. I really like those other two lambs over there, but for me today, that second class winner will be your reserve from Dearborn County.
Your best of Dearborn County goes to Maddie Dawson, and second best goes to Landon Smith. We'll go ahead and start into showmanship. With the junior showmanship will be grades 3 through 5. And intermediate will be grades 6 through 8. Senior showmanship will be grades 9 through 12. And then we'll have our expert showmanship with previous senior winners. Any Dearborn County kids that want to participate in showmanship, we'll do a Dearborn County class right here after the juniors. Any Dearborn County kids wanting to participate in showmanship?
In your junior showmanship, let's give these two young 4-Hers a nice round of applause, please. I think both of them have done a very good job this evening in all their classes. As I said earlier tonight, whenever I did the dairy show, I really like doing showmanship at the end of the evening. It gives me an opportunity to see these kids throughout the day and showing in other classes, and it also lets me see if they progress and get better as the day goes on. As we look at both of these, I really appreciate the attention that both of them spend and the attention that they give me and their animal in the ring. They do a very good job. I really appreciate that. But for me this evening, the one that sets their animal up, gets the legs set in the proper position, and just is a little bit quicker about that, the young lady's going to win this class. Taking nothing away from the young man, I think he's progressed a heck of a lot this evening. I think he's learned a lot, and I think he's going to really enjoy his next year in 4-H as he shows these sheep. He's done a good job. Let's give him a nice round of applause, too.
Our junior showman is Lila Strewing, and she has the opportunity to come back, I believe, for the next class after the Dearborn County kids. Last call for auction pictures. Last call for auction pictures.
If your animals are shipping to market tonight, you're shipping extra lambs or the lambs going to the auction, see AJ or Madison, they'll let you know where we're putting those. We got to find a place back here. We are trucking those out tonight, so see AJ.
I want to congratulate the Dearborn County kids for being here. I know this isn't all of them, but I appreciate you coming out in showmanship. Appreciate you being here too. I think you've really added to this, and And I hope you'll take a little bit of time to thank the Ripley County 4-H'ers and the folks that run this show for the opportunity to show here today. For our showmanship in the Dearborn County group, I know we've got a few different ages out here, but I really appreciate the showman that sets those feet up, takes special attention to getting those feet set and getting them in the right position before they get down or they get in a showing position themselves. I really appreciate the ones that can walk around the ring with that free hand just there as a guide, not resting it on that sheep's neck or doing anything else with that free hand, but letting that sheep know it's there should you need to. That just really shows to me that somebody's worked with those lambs really well. The one that does an excellent job with both of those factors, setting those feet up, getting it set, working that free hand in a way that it's a guide and not as a prop, young lady's going to be your showmanship winner.
Our Dearborn County showmanship winner goes to Maddie Dawson. Just a quick reminder that if you used a pin, you must clean out your bedding. If you used a pin, please clean out your bedding. Now we'll start with our intermediate showman.
Good group of showmen right here. It really came down to that last move for me to make my decision on which one was going to win this intermediate division. All three of them do a nice job. That junior that came in just tonight, I think, made a big improvement over the class that she was in and won, and I really appreciate that. But the showman tonight that really puts things together nicely for the one that puts things together the nicest for me this evening in this class is the young lady right here in the middle. She'll win this.
Your intermediate showman is Sophia Sullivan, and she is now eligible to come back in the senior class.
check. 4 young ladies that do an exceptional job showing sheep. I really appreciate that. Let's give them a nice round of applause. For me, the one that just really makes it look effortless and just really comes around that ring very smoothly, has her eye not only on me, but where she's at in the ring, really positions herself well, really sets that lamb up to its best profile. The young lady in pink will be your winner in this division.
Annika Struing is your senior showman and is now eligible to come back in the expert showman. Real quick to announce our showmanship plaque sponsors. Our junior showmanship sponsor is the Sherman Law Firm. Our intermediate showmanship sponsor is Hopewell Clover Bees 4-H Club. Our senior showmanship sponsor is Jason and Monica Hansen Family Farm. And our expert sheep showman sponsor is Kev's Field of Dreams, Kevin Menshofer and family.
three very good showmen. There's not a whole lot of difference in these kids, but they do have some different telltale signs about how they've worked with those animals and if they get frustrated with them or not. I really appreciate that whenever I see a 4-H'er that's worked and worked and worked in the ring and that lamb just will not cooperate, but I see them just continue to try, and I really appreciate that about them. I think we have a couple of showmen that really move around the ring very smoothly. They use that free hand whenever they... And we're going to see if we can get through this. They use free hand whenever they need to, but not very often. They set that lamb up nicely. The young lady in the green will be your supreme showman.
Riley McGee is your expert showman. Thank you everybody for coming out today. Make sure to clean up your area and drive safe.